All right, guys, it's been a minute since we've had the chance to review some of the latest news with this man, one of the pioneers of MMA media and the originator of the sexy blue polo itself. Always with the first question and the last beer. John Morgan, welcome back to SI. How are you, man?
It's good, man. Always a pleasure to hear from you guys, man. We got the UFC coming back to your neck of the woods, so it's perfect timing, man. Happy to hear from you.
That's right, man. We're getting warmed up. We're getting ready to go, and it's great to speak to you, man, because you got the sexy new microphone, but what's not sexy at all is the fact that we still don't know what the hell is going on with Jon Jones versus Stipe. And, I mean, I got to just ask you, John, straight up as we start off this chat, do you think this thing will happen anytime soon?
I do. Maybe I'm being a little naive, but I'm hopeful that it will. I will be honest with you. I was one of the guys when, John came back, I was excited about it. And then, Joe Rogan on the broadcast was like, hey, I'm here in summer. And I'm like, there's no way this fight is happening in summer. Like, it's just not going to come together that quick. But I'm hopeful. And if you look at the way the calendar lines out, I mean, look, Jon Jones took to Twitter, right? He kind of, hey, what do you think about me fighting in Madison Square Garden? And it just makes sense. I mean, that's his, original backyard. That's, the big platform. And you guys have been to those MSG shows. You need something special when you go to Madison Square Garden. And what's more special than Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic? So I know it's frustrating because it's not announced. It's frustrating because it doesn't come to fruition. But I believe there's time, and I believe it's going to happen in November.
There's a lot of moving parts, obviously, right? Like, depending on when Conor and Chandler happen, like, is that the MSG fight or is that on the MSG card? And does Stipe and Jones get bumped for December? And then there's also the fact that, like, how disappointed would you be if Stipe and Jones doesn't happen and instead we get Jon versus Sergei Pavlovich, which I think for a lot of people at this point might even be the tougher fight. How would you feel if it was that fight? And which one do you think is the tougher fight for Jon?
Oh, that's scary, right? Because Sergei is a scary dude. I mean, the run that guy has been on, he is absolutely a destructive force. And it would be a great fight, but I just don't think that's the kind of fight that captures the attention of the casual fan. I think that's what Jon Jones and the UFC, for that matter, are trying to do right now. So, first of all, you mentioned the Conor thing. I think Conor, the fight, I mean, you look at the way the calendar's lined up for him and Michael Chandler, I think that's got to be December in Las Vegas. That's got to be the year-end show right here in Sin City. And look, I don't know how, as you said, a lot of moving parts. Is Conor one of those guys that he's not just a businessman, he's a businessman. And don't forget the taxes in New York versus the taxes in Nevada. There's a big difference between what you get. And obviously he makes a lot of money and that tax revenue could be big. So is that playing in? Who knows how it's all shaking out. But I really do believe those are the two fights that we're going to end the calendar year with. And I think they're going to be great. Now, as far as if Sergei were to step in there, yes, I think the hardcores, myself, we would all be like, oh, man, wow, this is dangerous. This is amazing. But I just don't think that's the one that gets the casual fan talking about it. I don't think that's the one that gets the sports reporters, the people working in the local markets that just talk about MMA casually. They're not going to know who Sergei is. And Sergei, man, as destructive as a force he is, he's not really one that's going to go out and sell the fight. I mean, granted, not exactly Stipe is the biggest talker ever, but Stipe has the accomplishments that, mean that he doesn't have to get out there and do the talk because he's already walked the walk. So would it be a challenge? Yes, it would be a challenge. It would be an amazing fight, but I just don't think that would matter. And I don't think it matters to Jon Jones, if we're being honest. I mean, what does Jon Jones really have to prove at this point? I mean, the man has been dominating the sport for a decade. He really has nothing to prove. But to beat Stipe Miocic, to beat the man that has the most title defenses, that means something. To beat Sergei, yeah, it means something, but it doesn't mean the same in terms of legacy. So to be honest with you, if Stipe isn't willing and decides it's not worth his time, I hate to say it, but I think at that point, Jon probably says it's not worth his time either.
Wow.
And speaking of time, for people that don't realize, Stipe's last fight was on March 27th, 2021. Take that in for a second and have a think about it. Obviously a legend and one of the best heavyweights to ever do it, but turned 40 and is going into his 41st birthday. And you kind of have to think sometimes, like, what is this guy going to be 60 by the time they fight? They're going to need to have like one of those like little machines that takes them to the ring. Like, what are we doing here? Hey, by the way, just quickly, what do you make of this whole Jon Jones, Tyson Fury? Who really is the baddest man on the planet? Who can get out of a room? It's like some kind of magician thing going on here. Who can get out of the room the quickest here? What do you
David Blaine? We know David Blaine can get out of a room the quickest, right? No, it's crazy, man. Listen, the conversation is fun. I think back obviously to like Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. And I think they were just kind of playing around a little bit, right? They were just like, hey, we know how to keep each other's names in the headlines. We need to, we know how to keep each other at the top of the sport. And then it just ended up, snowballing to the point they were like, oh, well, we should actually do this. So look, the discussion is fun and it's funny to see and it's great, but I hate to kind of poo-poo on all of it and down it, but it's two different sports, man. I mean, we've seen it, right? I mean, no boxer is going to come into the world of the UFC and mixed martial arts and have success at the highest level. Could they beat, a mid-tier type fighter? Yeah, of course. But the opposite is true, vice versa. I mean, no mixed martial artist is going to go to the highest level of boxing and have success there either. So, I like the discussion. I like the conversation. It's fun. They're keeping themselves, getting some views on social media, keeping their names in the headlines. But I just don't think anything comes of it. I don't think Jon Jones would have success against Tyson Fury in boxing, and I don't think Tyson Fury would have success against Jon Jones in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you saw Tyson Fury say that to Israel anyway. He said, I'm not getting in any cages, in any MMA cages. And then also you saw Tyson Fury with Alex Pereira. And it's crazy seeing this guy standing next to each other. First of all, because Tyson actually got the man to smile. When Tyson Fury tells you to smile, you smile. So you got to smile at a time. But also just like comparing the size. Like Tyson Fury is a gigantic human being, as is Alex Pereira. But when they're standing next to each other, like they look pretty comparable. And you got to wonder, like, Alex Pereira being such a big guy, I know he's fighting Jan Blachowicz, and we'll see how he goes at 205. I wonder, do you think he could potentially be a better light heavyweight or a better heavyweight? Or should I say, do you think he could do better at heavyweight as opposed to potentially light heavyweight, just stylistically and maybe with that speed advantage? As long as he's not facing a guy like maybe, say, Jon Jones, who just has, vastly overwhelming wrestling.
Wow, that's actually an interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that because I've been thinking about the move to light heavyweight, and I do feel like light heavyweight is the place for him to be just because, I've been there. I've seen those weight cuts in person, man. I've seen how rough he looks, and he looks really rough. Like it's really kind of wild, as you said, when you put him next to Tyson Fury, to think that man gets down to 185 pounds, but we've seen it where it's just so drawn out. And how can you do that? I mean, I know that that's part of the sport, but really think about it. I mean, you have yourself that dehydrated, and then the next day, 24 hours or a little bit more later, you're supposed to be in this insane athletic competition. It's wild. So I like light heavyweight. I'm really intrigued to see what he does at light heavyweight. Now, as you said, styles make fights, and those high level wrestlers are always going to give him an issue. So that, stylistically matchups along the way, that is questionable. But I like to see him at light heavyweight. But I hadn't even thought about him at actually heavyweight. That intrigues me, man. I got to be honest. That intrigues me, man, to see. We got to see what he does at 205 first. I think that's the right place for him to be. But yeah, who knows, man? Maybe the guy could even be successful at heavyweight. He is a big dude. I mean, you guys have seen him, man, standing next to him. It's incredible. I'm excited to see it.
So here's the thing, right? They ran into each other at the airport in Melbourne, I'm pretty sure. Israel and Alex. It's like a movie. Like, these guys just can't escape each other. But what about this one? Alex going up to 205. If he can win the belt, how tempting do you think would it be for the UFC or even Israel, who says it's one and done, but potentially run it again now that you got a couple new wrinkles in the game?
If he wins the light heavyweight title, if Alex Pereira wins the light heavyweight title, I could absolutely see Israel Adesanya saying, I want to win that from you. Not that I necessarily need to win. I mean, obviously, we've already seen him make the move and make the try, but I think it would even mean more. That airport clip is hilarious, right? I mean, that just cracked me up. Like, literally, that made my weekend. I'm like, this is, because I love those memes that people are making. Like, Israel Adesanya goes and joins the PGA Golf Tour, and here comes it. I mean, just wherever he goes, I'm coming after you. It's so hilarious. They end up running each other in the airport. But listen, Izzy's got a little pettiness to him, right? He's got a little Jon Jones in him. I mean, he's not going to be like, hey, we had our story. You go enjoy your. I'm really happy to see Alex as light heavyweight champion. He deserves the success. You think he's going to say that? No, hell no. He's like, you can't chase it for me. I'm coming chasing for you now. So what a great storyline that would be. And as you said, would the UFC be interested? Hell yeah, they'd be interested. I mean, they're the ones that brought Alex in to begin with and understood what they were doing, right? They fast-tracked him to the title, but that was the right thing to do. The storyline was there. I don't need this guy to beat, number 15, number 13, number 11, number 9, number 7. I don't need him to work all the way up. I just need him to get a couple of wins, and then we put the storyline together. So, man, yeah, 100%. 100%. If Alex could win the light heavyweight title, We'll see the last style bender at 205, baby.
That'd be crazy, man.
I would love it.
Here's the thing, though, right? Looking a little bit more sort of closer to the future, what do you think happens with UFC 293 in Sydney? Like, you've got Rob and Dricus fighting at UFC 290, and just the turnaround, what is it, like 9 weeks, and Israel's meant to be fighting on the card. Do you really think Israel fights on the card? And who do you think it is against? Because if Rob or Dricus or any of those guys get injured in any way, I mean, it's barely enough time for a full training camp, let alone one for a guy like Israel, a fight that important, let alone coming off a training camp, let alone if you're injured. Do you really think either of those guys really do fight Israel at UFC 293, or do you think the UFC are going to have some kind of last-minute plan where they're like, all right, we need a new main event? Or do you think maybe someone like a Sean Strickland, if he can win, could be fighting Israel, who obviously Israel says he's wanted to fight Sean for a while?
Such a wild situation, right? I mean, certainly you got to think the UFC is ideally hoping the winner of that comes out unscathed, that Rob and Dricus fight comes out unscathed and is ready to compete in Australia. You got to think that's the fight they want to make. But man, I mean, you guys know Rob. I don't think he feels like he's going to be pressured by the organization. He'd be like, if that time frame doesn't work for him, if that schedule doesn't work for him, he's going to respectfully just have to decline and say, I'm sorry, guys, this isn't it. Maybe they're hoping that the opportunity means enough that regardless of what happens, that person will turn around and do it. But they're always going to have a backup plan in place. I know it's easy to criticize the UFC. It's easy to, talk trash about what they do and all those things, but they're pretty smart business people, right? And they're not going to go like, hey, we know 100% that the winner of that is going to compete. They understand what happens in a mixed martial arts contest, especially at the highest level. People come out of those things with injuries, and they're not necessarily ready to turn around. I think in an ideal scenario it happens, but they got to be thinking of a backup plan. I mean, and then you start wondering, I mean, do you wait for that fight to happen to make an announcement, to make an arrangement? I don't know. They're in a weird position. I still think they're going to hold out hope that fight happens, but I'm not optimistic, guys, if I'm being honest. I think Israel Adesanya will compete on that card. I do feel he will begin that card. I like the theory of maybe a 205 fight, maybe all those options. I'm hopeful that fight, the winner can show up for that fight, but I'm just not optimistic that it happens.
And only because, like, if you're going to do Rob and Israel 3, right, and that's just a big assumption. Like, Dricus could win, and then we see something completely different. But let's just say Rob wins, and then you've got Rob and Israel 3. If it's going to happen for a third time, it makes sense that it's going to happen in Sydney, right? Like, that's the card that it would have to happen. If it happens a month later or 2 months later, the whole thing, to me, falls apart a little bit, right?
I agree. That's the place that needs to take place. And I think that's why maybe the UFC is hopeful, right? Because even to give Rob that, that next opportunity, they may say, hey, the only place we can do it is here. If you can show up, we'll give it to you here. And so maybe they put that little, look, I mean, they can put a little pressure on guys to say, if you want to do it, we can do it here, sign up. But if not, we just don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, that fight should absolutely take place in Australia. It 100% should. But that is a fast turnaround. And as you said, we can't assume anything. I mean, Dricus, could win and could spoil the party, and maybe they assume, well, hey, here's Dricus. He's the new name, right? He's never had a championship contract. What if we come to Dricus and he wins and say, hey, amazing thing that you just accomplished. Listen, I know this is going to be a quick turnaround, but we know what we know the tension between you guys. We know you want to make it happen. Izzy wants to fight. This is the date he wants to do it. If you want it, it's yours, but you got to show up on this date. I mean, they can do that, right? I think that's what they would like to see happen. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that happen? But it's just going to be tough, physically. Whoever wins out of that fight has got to be ready to go, and that's easier said than done.
Fascinating situation, because apart from obviously a bunch of fighters being booked, also Israel saying that it's a stadium fight, and it's funny because him versus Rob, obviously huge stadium fight. Him versus Rick is great fight. All the Aussies are going to be super excited. Different kind of fight. It's not like I don't know what the UFC is doing, but I don't know how you manage okay, what kind of venue we're going to go with here? We're just going to try and secure a huge stadium and hope everything works out. We're going to go back to the usual type of arena that we work in Sydney. It's just a lot of stuff last minute for such a huge fight that is a history-making fight.
Well, Dennis, and let me just jump into that, man. If Dricus wins, I mean, honestly, the UFC, they want to do a show in Africa, right? I mean, there's no question. They've been talking about that for a while, and Dana has really started to mention that, a lot more lately, and say, now granted, we don't know what date that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, but as much as, Rob and Izzy needs to take place in Australia, right? But Izzy and Dricus in Africa? Oh my goodness. Can you imagine that? I mean, granted, we were, we were having these ideas in the African debut, having Usman and having Ngannou, and we've lost those opportunities. But man, I mean, Izzy and Dricus in Africa, I think at that point you would figure out something else to take place. And maybe at that point you're like, Volk, you ready to turn this thing around? Maybe let's get you in. We know you like to fight. Because we got a show in Africa. We're trying to do it 2024. We got some plans for that, baby. So a lot of options on the table.
Yeah, I know. If you're going to be doing anything like that, you got to be making sure you're looking the best. And if you're going to do that, no better way than with Manscaped's Weed Whacker 2.0. 2.0, baby. The new generation, the new evolution. The premium Manscaped Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear trimmer uses a powerful 7,000 RPM motor with improved steel blade system that upgrades the cutting performance from their first generation to better whack your weeds. You got that sexy skin safe technology. It's cordless, rechargeable, and a battery with up to 45 minutes of runtime. It's crap when you're driving through traffic or whatever and you start poking and pulling out all those nose hairs and the ears hairs. You look ridiculous. Don't look like a koala. Get the Performance Package 4.0 or the Platinum Package 4.0 because they're the best value for money, and they come with Weed Whacker 2.0 inside, and save 20% off and get free shipping with the code submission at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code submission at manscaped.com. From below to up top, get the best in grooming at Manscaped shop. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. And if you're watching this, I'll either be crying or celebrating right now, depending on what happens in the Celtics, the Boston Celtics Miami game. And if Jason Tatum doesn't turn over 3,000 balls in the fourth quarter and stuff it up, I'll probably be celebrating. But I'm also celebrating thanks to our friends at NordVPN for hooking me up with an amazing deal at the NBA League Pass, because I was able to change my location to Malaysia and basically board that bad boy for absolutely for free. And by the way, people don't realize this, and they keep asking us. They go, what's the deal with the VPN? Does it affect your speed? And I got to tell you, man, this thing is lightning quick, no speed throttling whatsoever. And by the way, you could use one account up to 6 devices, which sorts you out. Why not have a look on what Netflix can offer you all across the world? Why bother going in and out of different service streaming platforms when you can just change your location on Netflix and bang, a new movie, bang, a new TV show, bang, new things that you can check out. What about all the coverage around the world? Cheaper prices for flights, hotels, all sorts of benefits. NordVPN has you sorted. By there, one of the best apps in the game. And you guys can go to nordvpn.com/submission right now. Grab a huge discount, plus 4 months additionally for free off NordVPN. Right now, click the link in the description below. And by the way, it's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So jump on it right now and change your life forever, thanks to NordVPN. But John, speaking of risk-free, what's not risk-free is trying to secure a fight for Khamzat Chimaev, which we've been trying to see happen now for quite some time. Obviously, the risk comes in the fact that people aren't exactly sure which parts of the world he can fight in. He's had some visa issues in the past, and we've kind of been a little bit in limbo as to what his future holds. I got to ask you, how serious do you think this actual Kamaru Usman welterweight fight is? Because last time we checked, it looked like Chimaev was making that full-time move to middleweight.
That's the thing, is the weight class, right? I mean, do I think the fight could absolutely happen? Yeah. I mean, it seems like both guys are ready and willing to make it, and I love it. I love the idea of the matchup itself. I mean, obviously, at this point, Kamaru Usman needs to kind of rebuild a little bit and decide where the future of his career is. Meanwhile, for Khamzat Chimaev, who, I still think has a lot of momentum, even though he's got a lot of inactivity. I mean, what a win that would be for him to say, look, I told you I am who I say I am, and I need to be at the top level of the weight class. Let's go. But at the top level of the weight class, what weight class is it? You know what I mean? And you got Dana White out here saying, look, I'm happy to do the fight. I'm just not doing it at catch weight. And I get that, right? I mean, sometimes those catch weight matchups feel like they don't mean anything. Like, which division does it really impact? Which division does it really affect? So I'm hopeful that fight does come together. But I think, as you said, there's some of those things, the visa issues, the travel issues along the way. But again, just the weight class, just the logistics of the whole thing. So I am still hopeful, because it seems to be when you have two athletes that are both saying, hey, I'm willing to fight that other guy, I want to fight that other guy, when both guys are on the same page, I think at that point, there's just a matter of getting it all figured out. So I'm hopeful that fight can happen. But it's frustrating, right? Because I do believe Khamzat is that guy. I mean, I don't believe he's fake. I don't believe he's hype trained. I believe he is that good. But, this is a game of kind of momentum. And what have you done for me lately? And you got to stay active and you got to stay busy in there. So I'm hoping this thing can come together. I mean, who knows? Abu Dhabi, we'll see. There's some international events at the end of the year. So I'm hopeful we see this fight.
It's a fight that like I'd love to see happen, right? It's the perfect time with Kamaru Usman sort of like a little bit on the decline of his career after those title fights, not like a champion. Perfect time for a guy like Khamzat to go in there, and if he can win, it's like he's the man at welterweight. He's the guy that everybody's gonna want to see get that title shot. But the thing is, like, welterweight's pretty log jammed at the top, right? Like you've got Covington already getting the next title shot. We don't know exactly when. Then you got Bilal, who's like the Undertaker. He's got that streak. He's arguably overdue for a title shot. So in theory, he should be next. But then like what happens with Conor and Chandler, right? Like what if Conor wins and he's like, all right, I want the next welterweight shot. Like the UFC might jump at that. But then also when Khamzat goes in there and beats Kamaru Usman, he's got a massive case for the next title shot. Like how do you see this whole thing shaking out, John?
Well, Conor McGregor, isn't he a lightweight? He's not even ranked right now. Are you suggesting that Conor McGregor, who's not even a ranked welterweight right now, might get a title shot over a win over a lightweight? No, of course he would. He absolutely would. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's a whole lot. Listen, you got to get the Covington fight out of the way first. I mean, you got to make that thing happen. You know, even though, like, to be honest with you, I mean, if you look at it, Bilal Muhammad, as you mentioned, I mean, the win streak that he's on, you know, as far as who's deserving of it, but Dana White has already said, nope, Kobe's the guy. We're going with that guy. So let's get that done because, as you said, it's just kind of a logjam, and we need to get this thing out of the way. You know, I love the fact that you got Gilbert Burns, who's always willing to just keep competing and keep fighting, but you got to get these fights knocked out. So hopefully we can get these things scheduled because, you know, and even you look at Usman, it's funny, you know, you're like, well, he's kind of on the decline. Like he just lost to the current champ, you know what I mean? And the first one was a fight he was dominating until he was. So it's interesting. It's a real interesting situation, but just got to get that Covington fight done first, and then we can really start to sort this thing out because, as you said, Conor could come in there and throw a wrench. Because listen, man, I mean, love it or hate it, it's true. Conor McGregor, biggest star in the history of the sport, man. If he wins and he has a good performance and he calls out 170, the sport isn't just about meritocracy, right? It's not just about rankings. It's about selling pay-per-views. It's about entertainment, and that could actually happen. So just got to get this Covington fight scheduled and done first. Then we could all start to let it shake out a little bit. But you know, I love Khamzat in there. You know. Can he still make 170? I mean, is that still the spot for him? But if he's going to do it, you know, Usman would be the perfect opportunity for him to see, like, look, I am the number one contender. Let's go.
Just finally, John, before we wrap up, I've got to ask you, we saw Conor in Monaco just yesterday. He seemed to be having a pretty good time. Is this fight going to be happening with Chandler? Like, what is going on here? And what is your take on this fight? Because obviously Chandler's just basically in the gym all day, every day, training, getting ready for this moment. Conor McGregor's kind of been around the world having a few drinks at the Black Fortune and having a good time at BKFC, and he looked like he was having a good time yesterday as well.
Yeah, it's a risky fight. I mean, I do think the fight's going to happen again. I target the end of the year for this. I kind of always thought it would either be Madison Square Garden or Las Vegas. Now it looks like I think Jon Jones Stipe is, you know, November in New York. So I think that's what we're going to get at the end of the year. Of course, he's got to get through the 6 months of mandatory testing. I know there was some talk about, hey, will they give him an exemption and can he just do the 2 tests? And it always felt to me like that wasn't going to happen. I just feel like if USADA did that and granted that exemption, man, I just really think it would call into question kind of the legitimacy of the whole program. But the way the calendar lines up, it still makes perfect sense, perfect timing right now for December. So I think the fight is going to happen. Now, as for Conor, man, it's tough. It's risky because you're right. I mean, these are 2 different lifestyles right now. And I guess we're going to get to see on The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I'm still one of those guys that watches The Ultimate Fighter. I know a lot of people are saying, it's 30 seasons in, I'm done. No, I still watch it, and especially this. You know, I mean, you got the biggest star in the sport on weekly on ESPN here in the United States. So I'm definitely going to be checking it out. But it's a risky fight, but again, that's the thing that's so interesting about Conor McGregor. I mean, Conor McGregor has ascended to that level where it doesn't matter where he is in the rankings. It doesn't matter what streak he's on, whether he's got a couple losses, whether he's got a couple wins. You know, if he turns in one good performance, people want to see it. Interestingly enough, even though it was rivalry, but you know, I think about like Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz as guys like that, right? I mean, when they get announced for a fight and you say who it's going to be against, do you care? Like, well, hold on, what's the win streak of those two? What position are they in the rankings? You don't care. You're just like, oh, let's go. I'm in. And I think Conor McGregor's the same way. So it's a risky fight, man. I mean, you know, you think about Michael Chandler. He's been in some wars. He's been in some battles, man. He does get clipped a lot, right? Especially early. Conor McGregor, dangerous early, clips people, heavy hands. So you got to think, man, you know, I think it's going to be December in Las Vegas, and I'm telling you, I'll be sitting cage side, and as those two are looking at each other, and Conor's got that left hand hanging a little bit, and he's ready to go. I mean, you're going to be fired up, but the longer it goes, I think you would say, hey, it probably does favor Michael Chandler a little bit, just because of, the lifestyles and the activity and all those things. But, man, make no mistake, Conor McGregor, a gamer, man. I mean, it's easy to look back in retrospect and be like, well, look at the situations and the losses, et cetera, et cetera. But in those big moments, man, nobody delivers better in those big moments than Conor McGregor. And this is going to be a huge, huge moment. He shines in the spotlight. So count him out at your own risk. I'm not going to count the guy out. I don't think Michael Chandler is going to count the guy out. I think he understands what he's potentially facing in there. But all the things that you're saying are true. And that's the things that we're going to get the answer to on that night. I cannot wait.
Yeah, man. And hopefully you get there, because after watching his documentary, unbelievable string of injuries back to back. And as we all know, hard to stay healthy in this game, especially after that many injuries. Unbelievable. If anybody out there hasn't watched the documentary, check it out. He was definitely trying to get back in that octagon, but those injuries are insane. But for now, make sure to follow John Morgan at John Morgan MMA on Instagram. And of course, check out all of his great interviews and work at the MMA Underground on YouTube and on the website as well. John, thank you so much for joining us, man. It's a real honor and pleasure having you on the program. Can't wait to see what happens next, dude.
Always a pleasure, fellas. We got some big fights coming up soon.